So one question that investors are asking is what can go wrong in a multifamily investing deal, particularly a passive multifamily investing deal. A lot of times people think that this is just, you invest in multifamily deals and it's just fully up and to the right. There's never any problems. And I'd love to say that that's true, but that's not. There's always issues that come up in deals. But I want to give you a few things that really go over what can go wrong in multifamily deals. We're going to do it in 3 easy steps. All right, so step number 1, the first thing that can go wrong is that people a lot of times are not conservative enough when it comes to projecting how a property is going to perform. It's not uncommon that on paper things can look phenomenally well. And if you've ever been an investor or maybe you've bought houses, we had single family houses in the Cleveland area in the past before I got into multifamily, and it always looked incredible on paper. I thought, man, this is the best investment in the world. And then you get in and you see there's problems with tenants and the expenses are higher than what you think and all kinds of stuff would happen. And so there's a difference sometimes between how you project it and actually how things really can perform. So the first thing really is that in not being conservative enough. So when it comes to being conservative, this is a word people use all the time. They say, oh, it's conservative, it's a conservative investment. But when it really comes down to it, not having rosy projections, particularly on the rent growth assumptions, assuming rents are just going to grow exponentially, or just that everything's going to be fully up and to the right, or that on the other side of that, that the exit cap rate, when you sell a property, that the particular property is going to sell at a more attractive rate than what you buy the property for. So we typically, on those 2 metrics, we try to be more conservative. It's going to be a higher cap rate, which means it's going to be less favorable to sell in the future. And the rent growth, we always lower it from what the historic has been, just to assume that we're not making rosy projections. So again, conservative underwriting is really important, again, not just in name, but actually in what you're actually doing. And it can be from just how much you're putting into what you're going to do as far as expenses for the property. There's always going to be things that you forget as an operator. So when you look at a deal, especially as a passive investor, if you look at a deal and you see, man, I just don't see any sort of reserves here, or what happens if this thing doesn't just go exactly according to plan? And then actually that can lead to a problem where the property itself starts to run low on cash. And the worst part of all that is if you work down that line, you get to a place where you run out of cash, you have to start asking the investors for more cash or maybe withhold distributions. So that's one thing that can go wrong, is just really not being conservative enough on the front end when a deal is done. All right, so the second thing that can cause a property not to perform is really poor performance by a property manager. What I mean by that is a property manager, you really have them in to manage the property completely. They really are the single most important thing when it comes to your team and making sure a property performs. And so one thing that can happen is if a property manager does not lease up available units, or they're not renovating units in time and things kind of go slow, you go from a 95 or 90% occupied status to 80%, 70%, it can be really rough, because that is the whole income side. So you're looking at doing 2 things to really manage a property well. You're trying to increase the income and you're trying to lower expenses. So if they're really not managing well on the income side, then that's really going to hurt your bottom line. That's going to hurt your performance. And there's all kinds of reasons why property managers don't perform. And so that's why really good property managers or really good property management groups, they're really in demand. And typically you like to get property managers that already have experience in that particular market. They already have proven staff that know how to manage properties well. But really good property management is really important to make sure the property performs well. All right, so number 3, the reasons why properties don't perform when it comes to multifamily syndication. I mentioned income, not being as high as what it should be. The second, or I guess the last thing really, is that if expenses are higher than expected. So all of a sudden you have a pipe burst. Maybe you've got a gas leak. You've got, all the roofs need to be replaced. It's more severe than you thought when you bought the property. There's things that can come up. And again, that's really why what we talked about in the first step is really making sure that you have enough reserves to make sure that you can cover those type of times are really important. But if expenses come up, that can significantly reduce their performance. Some of this you necessarily can't predict. A lot of it you can by doing diligence correctly, by walking individual units, making sure you do a really good due diligence on the front end. You've got a great inspector that gets in there takes a look at the property. But sometimes even then things will come up. So that's why having contingencies is important. But again, if you all of a sudden decide you want to do all kinds of more stuff, and like in this place you come in, you want to do, all kinds more renovations than you ever expected, well, that will probably cause the property to not perform as well as you'd like. So again, it comes down to, with this asset, really understanding what the numbers are, what the rents have been, what the competing properties are doing, what's kind of a standard there, and really making sure that your budget, your rehab budget, the way that you're working your plan is going according to plan. So these are 3 things that cause properties to not perform well. But in general, there are a lot of things that allow properties to perform well. And so we love doing multifamily syndication. If you've invested in multifamily syndication, or if you're just interested in investing and you have questions, why don't you just stick below in the comments, maybe either what you've invested in or what you'd be interested in hearing me talk about on these videos. But thanks for taking the time to educate yourself. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.